All right. Well, welcome everyone. I just hesitate to even say the word December, but it is December. We cannot stop this movement. It is so fast and furious. Is it furious? Is that right? It's just crazy. And I even sat in my childlike self over the weekend, and I was a little bit saddened by the fact that it was already December. Because I remember when things used to go really, really slowly. But at the same time, I looked back at my last 11 months, and it was very important for me to just kind of go step by step and say, wow, yeah, that's right. End of last year in February, in December, I did these things. And then January was this, and then these kind of new awakening happened. It was really remarkable to kind of go through each month to reconnect with the speed of things, and then also knowing that no, I didn't just sit and did nothing and watch Netflix all day. There's so much that I learned, so much that I contributed, I received, and I gave. And there's kind of the exchange of breath, exchange of the prana that happened. That was so beautiful this year. So that's why I called it the intensely remarkable 2021. It's still intense. I just keep repeating that word. If you go back to every Monday, I probably started every Monday saying, oh my gosh, how intense this weekend was. Yeah, it was intense and remarkable. And to be here today tells you how remarkable you are, because we all have to survive a whole lot to be where we're at. Not just your lifetime of survivals, so many things you have to survive in order to be where you're at, but also you are so remarkable because you are finding ways to thrive in this world right now. I hope you can just take a moment right now and feel the support that you received over the last 11 months, the support of the cosmic flow, the universe, the divine, gods, angels, guides, your ancestors, and this Mother Earth, nature, animals, all living things, all sentient beings, and also your inner grit and your inner resiliency. So just let's all of us pause for a moment. Don't multitask. Just take a moment. Just take in all that goodness. That's goodness that you have harvested. I always think of that goodness as something like a warm peach right off of a tree branch. And I bite into it, and the juice just flows through. Or even like a really ripe tomato, or a nice cold ice cream cone in the middle of the summer for those of you in the Southern Hemisphere. And maybe it's a nice fireplace that you started for the winter, the crackling of the firewood and movements of the fire. Bring in the goodness back into yourself. Receive that with your open palms, like a gift. And as you breathe in, take in that goodness a little bit further down your lungs. And as you breathe out, let's share that goodness individually into this community, into this space, and beyond. We have so much that we have already received, and we have so much that we can still give back. That's something I truly learned this year. That truly, this universe is full of opportunities, full of gifts, many challenges that come into our lives, but they are gifts in disguise. Two more deep breaths in, pull that goodness in. A little bit deeper into your lungs and breathing out, sharing the goodness outward. And wiggling your toes, wiggling your fingers. Occupy this body that you are in. So it's not that you only become aware of your tissues and your muscles and your bones and your circulations and your nervous systems. It's not just about becoming aware of them, but inhabiting them, occupying, dwelling in you. That's very different. That's different. Just then doing the mindfulness practice. So dwell in your own being, in your body. And if dwelling inside your body feels uncomfortable at times, pick a spot that is benign. Maybe your pinky toe. That always works for me. I have a special relationship with my pinky toes, actually. So just notice your pinky toes. Can you feel into your pinky toes? Can you become that pinky toes? And moving up and become your kneecaps. Be the knees. Knee replacements and all. That's you. That's part of you now. Become your knees. Your knees are so important because that is the first, I call them the headlights of your being. They shine the way for us. They shine the pathways for us. Become your tailbone. Fluff up your tailbone. Imaginary tail fluffing up. Wiggle your hips a little. Get in touch. If you feel like you're out of touch, circle around the pelvic floor. Move around. And then come back inward, not outside in awareness, but inside out awareness. Moving up your spine and occupy your heart center. This can be a very difficult time of the year for many of us. It's like I just went to the post office, this jolly, jolly Christmas stuff going on. We're supposed to feel jolly. We're supposed to feel happy and joyful. But this can be a very lonely and sad and old patterns creep up kind of a time. Let's go into your heart center, not from the outside in, but go inside. Occupy that heart space, your fourth chakra. Stretch out yourself in that space, front, back, side to side, top and bottom. Occupy that space. I always think of like putting a love sack on there, on that space, and just sit back on it. Look around, open up the curtains. Maybe the heart center's windows could open up a little bit, get the breeze in. Shine the light in there. Occupy you. Come back home into you. And moving up into your throat, collect your saliva in your mouth for a moment. And when you're ready, know that saliva is formulated perfectly for your DNA, for your vibration. So throw in a little bit of divine energy in there, a little bit of maybe character that you need to have in you, maybe a little more strength, maybe a little bit softening, maybe more love, maybe more laughter. Throw that into your saliva. Then consciously, intentionally swallow that and send that down to your belly. This is your medicine. You're swallowing it every day, all day, keeping you lubricated inside. And checking in with your throat. Have you been listening to your own inner voice? How are you expressing your inner voice? Are you using the writing, singing, humming? Maybe sometimes crying out loud. Maybe you need to scream. Or maybe you need to tune into a radio station that you haven't tuned into and sing along the songs that you love. I often will turn on the comedy channel on our local radio stations that we have. And I just laugh. Silly, silly jokes. PG-13 kinds. I just love it. Love laughing out loud. I actually love listening to my own laughter sometimes in my car. Spend some time with your own thoughts that come out of your throat. Vocalizing. Your voice is the most healing vibration of all sounds. And moving up between your eyes and a little bit behind. Just around the third eye. The third eye is not an eye that really looks outward, actually. It's the eye that looks inward. See if you could occupy that space. The sinus cavity kind of looks like a butterfly shaped. So sit on the butterfly ride. Come back in, come back into who you are. Not become aware only, but become you. You are it. This is it. So be fully you. And then go and roll your shoulders, wiggle your toes, your fingers, maybe shake it out a little bit, shake things out of the top of your head. You may want to massage your mohawk line, maybe rub your cheeks, rub your hands. And when you're ready, slowly opening your eyes, come into the space. All right, well, welcome everyone. Anything, Chris, to add?
You're going to bring me in like that. I was almost feeling like I needed to fall asleep. It's like doing that, taking the time to really feel what's going on. It's just, there's a lot of tiredness going on for me. But one thing that I'm reminded of too is the wave effect that we're constantly in. And I think it's so easy to forget this, that things that are happening right now started sometime earlier. And so it's like the wave is breaking right now. And I'm feeling this week and last week, is that some of the waves that are breaking, it feels like it's adding stress, but in fact, it's things that I wanted to set in motion. And it's things that I want to see happen, but they're all coming together now at the same time. And it's feeling like it's making it more intense, so there's that effect that's rolling. But yeah, it's so important to stop and feel the reality of what's going on behind that. So for me, it was just feeling like that relaxation really made me aware of the internal tiredness that's sitting there right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then I think over the years, we have been in the communities of a lot of different meditation groups, a lot of mindfulness groups, and a lot of spiritual communities as well. But we tend to patternize our even spiritual practices. And I think what I would really love all of you to do as we, wrap up this year is to notice, like, what are my tendencies? Like, what do I get drawn towards more often than the other things? So if I talk about foundations, let's say, and I say to all of you, hey, foundation of your health is that you have to be hydrated and you have to be digesting your foods. And then you start to go, yep, I'm not going to listen to that. But the moment I start to say, hey, but you know what? Ancestral healing is super important too. And you just go, oh my gosh, tell me more about that. Okay. That's another way that you are limiting your awareness. Because what happens is a lot of times people will do the meditation that it's kind of like their own set rules and that's all they do. And I've told you this experience like a long time ago, and some of you might have heard me say this, but this was years ago when I used to teach a yoga class. And there was this one lady that would not show up to my meditation part of the yoga. So before yoga, I always started with about 15, 20 minutes of sitting meditation. And she won't show up to that. But then she would just be sitting out there and then she will come right as we're starting to go into asanas. And so that she liked the movements part, right? So I asked her one day, I said, well, why don't you just come in and do your meditation, with us? She said, oh, no, I've been doing the same meditation for 35 years. And I have a thing that I do. So I do it already. I did it already. So I don't need to do that part. And I thought, wow, the whole point of yoga is to yoke, right? It's to bring you together as wholeness. And why are you doing yoga if you are so rigid in your mind, right? So much of the spiritual practices, it's like that tastes good. So I'm just going to go for that. That just sounds yummy. So I'm just going to do that. But what I'm asking you to do is do things that are a little bit bitter to your taste buds, things that are a little bit pungent, okay? Things that you don't normally want to taste. So in most of the Western cultures, we eat kind of the same things. We eat sweet, creamy, like creamy stuff, like buttery stuff, dairy things. So we eat sweet and creamy and salty. Those are kind of the only taste that most people are tasting, just in general, because we eat in lifetime in a Western society, we eat about 16 to 17 foods in our entirety of our lives. 16, 17 varieties of foods. That's it. That's it, everyone. That's nothing. Okay. You could be repeating the same thing. So if you're not introducing yourself to a little bit of bitterness, things that you go, oh, I don't like it when Masami goes into the science of it. I don't like it when she starts to go down that road of like this supplement and that, or this diet, or you got to be drinking half of your body weight in ounces, but don't surpass 100 ounces. Like you just go, oh my God, I don't want to hear it. I wish that she will go back to the chakra balancing. That would be so much better. Okay. You're tasting the sweet, salty, and creamy. That's all your taste buds are trained to do now, right? So go towards things that you go, I don't want to read that. I don't want to hear it, but I'm going to do it. So I know Chris is like, do you see everyone. Do you see him? He's just like leaning in. He's like, I got things to say. So should I be quiet now, Chris, so you can say stuff?
Don't worry, it won't take long.
Just kidding.
I was just reminded of, there's this concept in Zen that is the one taste. And so it's ultimately that preferred or not preferred or neutral, that ultimately all of these experiences are the same. And so we shouldn't reject any of them. So it's that's just what I was reminded of as you were talking about, because we all have those preferences, the things that we like, they feel good, they come more easily either because we like them and they feel good, or because we've done them and they're more familiar. So it's easier to settle into them. But I want to also repeat something I've said before many times, which is this idea that in order for us to activate our learning capacity, we actually have to be in a state of what's called disequilibrium. So we have to be off kilter, out of step, disoriented a little bit. And that's what opens up our whole system to learning and moving in a different way, not just simply repeating the old familiar patterns. And so it's something that Masami and I have talked about more and more these days, is how the idea of training is sometimes really detrimental. This is what I'm hearing in what she just said, is that when we're training, whether it's in a meditation style or how to do something, essentially that idea of training is just like a train on tracks. We're learning how to do something in a predictable, reproducible way over and over and over again. So it starts to eliminate spontaneity, creativity, and then also just flexibility around what is possible and what we're willing to take in besides what we thought we wanted to do, hoped we wanted to do, or planned to do, but it's not working out that way. So if we can relax those things, and I'm saying this in the context of this year-end energy that's getting stirred up right now, because it's a lot. Like Masami said, there's so much going on right now, and it feels like this big wave is breaking. But again, it's like, just remember what started it is already gone. We're now feeling the results of things that have been growing and moving to this moment now. And then that's going to continue happening as we go on too. And if we can stay with it and not label it, not say, wow, I really wish it was this way and not that way. I really preferred it when it was like this. I would really rather that it was that way. If we can just take it as it comes, this is one of the big lessons that I have learned over the years. And one of my really key teachers put it this way. He said, you have to make friends with what is. So as you start to surrender, I'll use that word, surrender expectation and preference and all those things we've talked about here, you can actually feel that there's not so much struggle as there seemed to be. There is, in fact, a welcoming sense of friendliness. And that sounds really strange with all of the chaos that's out there right now. But it's there. And it's not often the way we expect it to look. And we have to give up something about what we expect it to look like in order to see what it is. And I think that's all I have right now.
Well, that was pungent. Yeah, I was going to say that was really sweet. And then I was like, no, that's not the taste. It was pungent for me. So it was really good to remind myself to make friends with this moment. What's now? That's the hardest thing right now, because so many of us are just like, oh my gosh, another variant with the COVID. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen to this school system? What's going to happen to our policies, this and that, traveling, the plans we've made? There's so much that's getting stirred up. So to make friends with that, you have to inhabit your own being. And if your practice around spiritual practice has always been to build a witness practice or awareness practice, I challenge you that to change that a little bit and come back inside of your being instead of witness yourself from the outside in kind of a practice. When you can begin to inhabit yourself and you actually sit in your being, a lot of things can go spin all over around you, but you do find yourself in the eye of the storm. So that's a different practice than just having a mindfulness practice where you sit and witness yourself. So I hope you can see that nuanced difference. And, I will definitely go into that a little bit more as we go through this December and then during our way making as well. Also, I wanted to kind of mention about the solar eclipse too. That was amazing. That should have stirred up a lot of things in all of us. Okay. I think even the most even keel, level-headed person like Chris had to go through some ups and downs over the weekend. And what we realized was that we had incredible stories that we were just telling ourselves that were just too old and archaic. And they were these kind of belief systems that were no longer serving us anymore. And those things revealed themselves quite a bit over the weekend. And I was able to name, with Chris's help, my, I would call it the entity inside me that tends to come over when I feel like there's an injustice in the world, or maybe I was not being treated fairly. That really gets me going. And I felt like I was not being treated fairly for this thing that I was going through last week. And the injustice sensations came up inside me. And I felt this entity kind of starting to take over me. And I actually visualized this entity. And it was this like a amoeba-like looking things. They were like a really squishy thing. So Chris called it, well, why don't we call it a squishy? So I've been calling this entity the squishy. So I have Mr. or Mrs., I don't know, Miss Squishy inside me. I think it's a Mr., but it's a Mr. Squishy that comes over me. And Chris will tell you, my demeanor changes. And I was doing a very important muscle testing on this one project. And I kept not getting my muscle testing quite right because it wasn't me that was doing the muscle testing. It was the squishy that was doing the muscle testing. And squishy thought that it was not fair to me. What was happening, the outcome was not fair to squishy. So all the answers were the opposite, meaning what would squishy like the world to be? And so, to make the long story short, it was really important that I went a lot deeper to myself and say, oh my gosh, hi, Squishy. So now he has a name. I've been in touch with this Squishy. He's not as difficult to handle anymore. Like, I'm making friends with this Squishy. I don't know. I'm probably not going to eliminate him completely, but I am not getting taken over by him. And I'm going to introduce you to Chris's. He's got an entity also. And I wasn't sure if he liked this name, but I'm just going to call it that because I named his entity. His entity is called Mr. Flat. Mr. Flat.
Actually, I have to correct you. It's a little Mr. Flat.
A little. I don't think he's that little.
No, because it has the feeling of one of those kids book characters, the little Mr. and little Miss characters. So I picture this little blue circular blob with legs and a little mustache and a bow tie and a little bowler cap on. And he's very intent on not having his energy field have a ripple, not a single ripple. So it's really interesting. What I wanted to say to this, and I know that one of these days in the not too distant future, we will dig into this, because what we're really talking about here are archetypes. And so what's so interesting, I'm going to pick one that's a pretty familiar one, which is the idea of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. And so that image of the round table, you have these very dominant kinds of archetypal figures that represent different qualities of the personality or the soul. And they sit together in this round democratic kind of way where they hold council. And the funny thing is, our personalities are just like this. Sometimes Squishy will be dominant in Masami. Sometimes little Mr. Flat will be dominant in me. And what's interesting is every time they speak, they say I. So we just assume it's the same I that's talking all the time. That's just in a different mood or something like that. But if you really pay attention, there's a whole different need that's trying to be expressed. And one of the things that is so important about it is to acknowledge it and not to shut it down. And that's something that we do it to ourselves. We do it to other people for much the same reason as what I just said a few minutes ago. It's uncomfortable. It's not preferred. It's like, you were so nice 5 minutes ago. Why did you have to suddenly change and get prickly on me? You know, those kinds of things. Go back to the nice. I want the nice. And so this is something we'll be exploring this more later. But that's how I see it, is that it's in this same vein of what we're talking about with welcoming change, welcoming new energies, welcoming new potentials. This is part of it, is that when these characters in our personality, which is such a complex composite of all these different characters that we've collected over the years, and we're all made up of all of these many archetypal characters. But when they come forward with force, we need to give them a chance to be heard. Because if we try to shut them up, they might go underground. Well, that's probably what the worst thing is if they go underground. But they'll definitely get louder at some point, especially if they were pushed underground. So it's recognizing that part of this movement of the waves is to welcome these other ways of expressing ourselves, because it's coming from our organs, our microbes, our neurons, the cells of our body, our experience, all the ancestral family experience that's built up over time, and they're all in there. And so how could one singular voice that says I speak for all of that, one at a time? So that's one of the practices too that we're developing, is to pause and let that voice say what it needs to and express what it needs to without being slapped down or told to be quiet or told that it's being disruptive. Because once they can do that, they can actually relax and pass the talking stick to the next person at the round table. So we actually are a committee. And if you've ever worked on committees, you know how those can be. But that's pretty much how we operate. And I think the more we get good at listening to the members of the committee, the more the committee is actually effective at getting work done and living life. So anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Chris, remember you said that the Mr. Little Flat was super, like you said, it's just 2-dimensional, like a paper.
Yeah. Like
super thin, right? And here I am, this squishy that just comes in. Like when he goes into the flat, little Mr. Flat comes in, I go giant with my squishy. And I want him to just express himself. But then he just goes flatter and thinner. And like, I can't find him, so we really needed to find each other's voice and naming it and not be judged for that, and allow these characters to fully express at times, but be heard, made a huge difference. So I would be curious what, characters you guys have. Feel free to put it on the chat. We'd love to meet your other entities, other archetypes that show up on your dinner table.
I wanted to add to that, the ones that really came up strongly for us, these are survival characters. These are aspects of us that learned to be this way so that we could make it through something very difficult. They're protective. They're trying to take care of us and not have us be harmed or hurt in any way that we can avoid it. And so you'll find that you have something like that too. You'll have a version of it that comes up for you at those times when you feel like you have a need to be defensive, to protect yourself. And it's other times too, but those are the ones that really showed up for us just recently. And so that's why they're so memorable right now. But I would also say that those are for us, those are very strong characters. And there are lots of other ones. And I would just say that a clue, if you want to watch this in yourself and others, just to watch how something will shift. Something will change in terms of what we hoped, expected, wanted, and then a new voice comes. And with that voice comes a change in sometimes voice tone. Masami mentioned demeanor already, facial expression, language, phrases that are used. And those have all become clues. And as we're getting better at this with each other, it actually becomes comical. If there's any kind of angry charge to it, it doesn't last very long because we'll identify it and we'll be able to say, oh, that's who's talking. Okay, go ahead, Squishy. You've got the floor. Say what you need to say. Little Mr. Flat needs to have a moment to not be disturbed, and then it's okay. So, yeah, it's really interesting to pay attention and not think that we're somehow belittling ourselves by acknowledging these things. We're not less because we acknowledge this. This is actually, it's committee. It's a committee rule. And if you allow one voice to be a tyrant, it's chaos in the whole system. It leads to a revolution. That's not a good thing inside of us.
Yeah. And I think, feel free to name those things, just as you would name your feelings. You name it to tame it. But for me, it's not even necessarily taming it, but just before you tame it, there's a moment of listening that happen, naming it, taking a pause to listen to the squishy, then it just naturally tamed itself. And that's happening probably for many of you already, since I would say lunar eclipse and then the solar eclipse was really just crazy times. I'm sure many of you felt it. Like I said, I'm going to use the word intense again. It was really intense, but it kind of stirred up the things that you thought you already processed. So that's going to continue for a little bit longer. So be prepared for that this month, to maybe go back to some of your old stories. Oh, this is when I react that way. Oh, yeah. And if you can name it, if you can pause and then listen in, because it has its own value. Why does this thing squishy comes in to me? And when is injustice and something I don't think it's fair, it's a lot to do with where I grew up. Growing up in Japan, in the society, as many of you know, I just didn't fit in whatsoever. And there's a lot of just kind of like unfairness towards our family, and just for looking so differently from everybody else. And I just really struggle with that injustice. And sometimes that injustice, unfairness in the name of so much fairness, because they wanted to flatten out everyone. They wanted to make sure that the whole community was served equally. And I didn't see that as a fair way of addressing things either. So those, me as a little kid starts to come up. And I remember in kindergarten, my kindergarten teacher had to call my mom and said, your daughter Masami will not fold her origami papers when we're all folding origami papers. She just goes and puts her shoes on and she goes out there and she starts to play in the playgrounds. Well, there were no kids. Like nobody was taking over my jungle gym because they were all indoors folding their papers. And I didn't care for origami papers. Who cares if you could fold the triangles perfectly? And I just wanted to go play. So I was out there by myself. Nobody will bother me. I thought that was a really kind of a fair thing to do. But, so I think that little 4-year-olds come out and says, it's not fair, even though the law said so, that kind of thing. So get to know your Mr. and Mrs. and who knows what, little, big, whatever, and really get to know that particular character that tends to come up this time of the year. Particularly holidays really bring out a lot in us, good, bad, and ugly. And I always remember Ram Dass's quote, if you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family, right? I think the key you may want to underline is go spend a week with them, with the family. For me, 48 hours is probably maximum that I can spend with my family. So I pretty much can't handle after that. A week would just, I don't know what that would do to my own limbs. So, but, so this is the time that really challenges all of us to check back in with ourselves and say, am I occupying who I am? And if you feel like you're being pulled apart, you feel like you're just getting fragmented, you feel like you're just not grounded enough, and you're like, oh my God, where's my grounding meditation that I need to plug it in? What that means is that you are not occupying your centers. Okay. And then I will try to, go through some of this, and then I will definitely take you through the different vortex of the bodies that you definitely want to occupy during our way making as well. But make sure you begin to occupy you. Okay. And we do want to actually quickly talk about the way making. Do you mind, Chris, kind of talking about that?
Yeah, I'll pull that up. And
let's be mindful of the time so we can read some of the chats too.
I'm going to share my screen just so you can navigate with me. So give me just a second here. Okay. So with, if you want to find the waymaking, just to navigate to it, I wanted to point out it's on the homepage of the website, so masamicovey.com. And you can click into that and find out more about how to sign up there. But what I want to say, the reason that we came up with this idea, we started this last year, and it's something that we knew immediately would be something we would want to do every year. I mean, if not just for our own sake, it's so worthwhile to do it. And it goes back to this idea of missing some kind of meaningful communal ritual. And that was really the origin of the idea, is how can we come together around some kind of end of the year. It's a threshold time. So it's that idea of bringing the liminal space of transition forward so that we're aware of it as we go into it, and turn it into something that is, a ritual doesn't have any meaning unless we have people there that assign value to it. And so what we ask everybody to do is to bring their own elements, and we provide some structured ideas about how to do that and some descriptions as we go through. It's this idea, I don't know if you can see my screen completely, but there's this great quote from Joseph Campbell where what he says is that when you're connecting with ritual, you're connecting with the deeper myths I'm not going to read the whole quote, but it's this idea that the myth is being reenacted through us. So what we're doing when we participate in a conscious ritual act, what we're doing is we're remembering the wisdom of our own life. And so that's something that we can really amplify together at this time where we have a solstice that will have just happened. We have the new year coming. We have the Christmas holiday and the other high holidays that are happening. And so for us, this was just an important way to mark a transition from old to new. Because if we don't do that, our lives just kind of bleed together. And we end up repeating the same things in an undifferentiated way. And before we know it, time's up. So this is a really, really powerful way for us to be conscious of the movement of time through our lives, of our own experiences on that, excuse me, on that journey. And so you can learn more on the website and click into it. I'm gonna have to pass it back to Masami because my voice is going.
Okay, are you okay? Can you keep that? Oh, it's okay. You didn't keep that screen up, but basically the way making is for us to really acknowledge this year and what we have been through, because I think we live in a society, particularly in the West, is like, we're all looking ahead. Oh, forget this year, put them in the garbage, you know. I don't know, you remember, but several years ago, it was like one of the late night show hosts actually blew up that year in a football field. I don't know, many of you saw that, but anyway, basically people are just going, forget this year, F this year, you know, we can't stand this anymore, let's move on. But the fact is, the culture that I grew up in, the end of the year is a very quiet time. And the 29th, 30th, 31st into the particularly first 3 days are very, very quiet, because it's a time that we are basically bridging two realities, two realms together from the last year to the next year, but also a lot of reflective time. And it's a time to receive and then recount the blessings and to really revisit what you have learned and what you have accomplished, but also how you've been able to shift. And if we don't take the time to do that, it's like a graduation. We have graduations for different, you know, when you graduate from elementary school, when you graduate from middle school, high school, college, whatever, but we don't do the kind of a mini celebration and the ritual to end this journey that we've been all taking individually as collectively. And that's the space that we want to provide. And this is something Chris and I have done for years. But last year when we did the way making, we saw how profound that was for all of you that participated. And so this year we want to bring that back in with the different, like every year, it just will present itself which theme we want to go with. This year's theme is definitely cord cutting, and it's going to be removal and renew, but also a lot of like revisiting some of your stories from the last close to 20 years. And during the way making, I will actually give you the exact year. There are two main years that we're going to be looking at in your last almost 20 years, that the pattern's been repeated. But there are two major points in your life that has repeated into this year. So we want to make sure that you become consciously aware of what you've been repeating. And then we want to renew that for the next year. But if you don't bring it to the surface and you don't become aware, just like I said, you got to name it, you got to listen to it, you want to become aware of it in order to tame it. And so that we don't repeat the same movie, right? We don't repeat the same sequel. It's like, what is it? So many movies have like sequels, you know, like Star Wars too. Oh my goodness, could you please stop making them? I think they're done with it. Thank God. You know, it's like, how many more Back to the Future do you need? Okay. We don't need that. So it's like, we don't want to recreate the same story, but in order to not repeat it into the next year, you've got to take care of it this year. And there's some rituals that we did growing up that will welcome the gods of this year, not the next year, but the gods of this year must enter into your house. And you need to clear the space for them so that you can serve them. In Japan, we'll serve them a little bit of sake, right? To welcome them, to thank them for what they have brought into our lives this year. So that's what the way making is. So it's not about forecasting. It's not about creating what the future is going to be like, but let's take care of the debris today. Let's take care of the gifts and the garbage, right? So that we can wrap up this year. That's what we're going to be doing on the 30th. So I hope many of you can look into it. Even just reading through what we wrote up will be meaningful for you. Just to kind of even go, wow, this is a new kind of a concept. I want to do that. And you may join or you may not, but you can at least bring that kind of mindset back into your yearly practice. So that's what we want to invite you for. Okay.
And if I could just come back in now that my voice is back, I've been talking a lot today already. This idea of way making came about also from something that you may have heard us talk about before, which is when we're looking at our own path. And this is where the idea of seeking predictions and forecasts is really enticing about where am I going to go? Where will I be in 6 months or a year from now? Of course, that's an exciting thing to think about. But if you're actually looking at your own path, it actually, it only goes as far as you are right now. So to see what your path is, you have to turn around and look at where you came from. You have to look back. And so this idea of waymaking is taking stock of that path and seeing where you've been, where have you traveled? And from those travels, in the blank canvas that's ahead of you, where will you go next? Is it more of the same, or do you need to move differently? So do you want me to show the screen with the details one time, or do you think
no, I think everybody, just go to masamicoffee.com, or we put the link on the email as well. And it's right on the homepage. So, but I have to read this comment that Linda said. She says, Masami, maybe folding origami is your bitter and pungent. I think you're onto something here. I still do not like folding origamis. Like, it's just, I mess up the cranes, and then the wings don't open up whenever I fold them. It's like, where did I go wrong? Like, I have no idea which fold that I did not do quite right. So at the end, they're supposed to kind of open up and they don't open up. So anyway, you're right. So maybe when I have a little bit of spare time, I might go back into folding origami papers. But it's, what it tells me is that I just have always had a hard time following directions. Like, I'm just going to figure it out as I go, See, Chris he should be laughing out loud right now because I just do not.
I'm just thinking about that book that came out a few years back called Everything. What is it? Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And you missed out on the origami unit. So, yeah.
Yeah. And Penny goes, how are you at wrapping gifts? Well, this is why the God created the gift bags. So I can just throw it in there and put the tissue papers and call it good. Okay. Anyway, so, yeah, I know Richard is like, I'm reminded of the movie Groundhog's Day. Yes, it's totally, that's what's kind of happening right now. So we have to clear the Groundhog's Day in December, everyone. It's so important that you do this year before you go into 2022, because trust me, you're not going to even have the time to sort out things next year. It's just going to hit the ground running so fast. Did I tell you the next year is intense also? Intense times multipliers. Like, I don't even know. It's just really super fast and super intense. So you've got to slow down at the end of this year. Please, please do that for yourself. So we're going to do it more in like a retreat style. Okay. It's not going to be like teaching kind of thing, but a lot of meditation, music, poetry, going inward and support. So, and I just wanted to make sure that for those of you that have been interested in doing a small group with me, I don't have a lot left on that. So if you've been wanting to do that, it's one of the most powerful things that I have ever offered in the past. I love it. Just the right 4 people will show up to a group. It's always so sacred and it's so supportive, and we all hold space for each other, and you learn so much from one another. And it's 2 hours of just beyond imagination, beyond learning. It's so healing. I could see Lynn just nodding her head. Yeah, I know. I'm looking forward to seeing you. It's so amazing that the people that have done this just love repeating it whenever I do offer this. So please, if you are interested in, please do go and purchase. There are only, Chris put up only 4 spots left. So yeah, it's 2 hours of bliss, Mary Basse says. So
I throw out a couple of things really quick that came in the chat, which is some of the names that were shared. And so Mary's 2 names that she had are, they almost to me sound like sounds. So the first one was Grat and the other one is Seas. And then Linda had Little Miss Poor Me and Big Mr. Angry. So yeah, we'll have some fun with this another time.
I think I share the cousins with you. Yeah. I definitely am Big Mr. Angry for sure. And Little Miss Poor Me, it's like, it's not even little. It's like, I'm the older sister of that Poor Me. Yeah, I definitely have them too. Yeah.
I also wanted to just say off the cuff that, last time we were on, Masami mentioned a change in our format or frequency, and just stay tuned on that. We're transitioning just like everybody else is with all of the things that are coming, and we will keep you posted about when we have things coming up, whether it's in this format or others. But we have to also do the same thing we're talking about with everyone here, is we have to go with the flow of our lives also and just learn where it's pointing us. And that's what we are exploring right now. So stay tuned on that.
Yeah. And then just as Melinda said in the beginning, she said, it was like withdrawal from Masami and Chris, when we didn't see you for 2 weeks. I felt the same way. And, I don't know what the format's going to look like, but please know that I will always show up. Okay. And it's not like we're going to be like pulling ourselves completely. We might not be able to show up every Monday. That's kind of becoming the reality of our lives right now. But we will show up as much as we can and balance our lives as well. So that's kind of, where we're at right now. We haven't quite fully, my heart is not fully in the membership things. It's just, I don't know what it is. Maybe because I grew up in once again, in a society of Japan where it's like, if you don't have a membership, you're not allowed to enter in. It's kind of the gated city, gated community idea. I just kind of resist that a little bit. Maybe that's my bitterness and pungent and all that. But so I have a little bit of hard time with that. But so we will be here. We will continue this month for sure. And we will do what we can. So let's just see how this organically unfolds for all of us. Okay. So that's what I have for you. And I think as a homework for next week, please name your own gremlin. Okay. Name your squishy, name your little Mr. Flat. Okay. Your Mr. Grat. Okay. And see if you could have a conversation with it. Okay. You don't need to go be quiet or anything like that. And also notice, for those of you that really rely on your muscle testing, check it in and say, when I am testing Mr. Squishy, his muscle testing sucks. Okay. It's completely wrong, like absolutely wrong. Okay. So, because he just doesn't want the world to operate in the way that it's unfolding. Okay. So pay attention. Who is the one that's answering your muscle testing? Who is the one that is doing the pendulum? Okay. I mean it. I don't care what tools you use, whether you use your body, whether you use a tool like a pendulum or other things. Who is this I that is answering your question? That is a very important thing to look into, because if you don't identify who the subject is, your muscle testing might not be quite accurate. Okay. So to Mr. Squishy, to Chris.
And little Mr. Flat.
It was nice to see all of you. It was so beautiful to see all of you, and enjoy the rest of the week, and we'll see you next Monday. Namaste. Bye.